There is a fear that speaks in whispers, a steady tightness that turns small decisions into crises and steals the present from every hour. Miyamoto Musashi called the opposite Seijaku, a cultivated stillness that narrows perception, removes needless motion, and closes the doors anxiety uses to enter. In the next minutes, you will learn precise, repeatable actions drawn from samurai practice that cut that static and restore a quiet center of attention. Chapter 1. The Noise Inside. There's a particular kind of fear that does not announce itself with alarms or panic. It arrives as low, steady static behind every choice. A small, persistent certainty that something is missing and must be fixed right now. That static warps attention, narrows perception, and makes simple actions feel like urgent battles. And because it is quiet, we mistake it for the atmosphere of our lives, rather than the symptom of a habit. Today, we will consider an ancient countermeasure, Seijaku, the cultivated stillness of the samurai, and how it can be made a practical system to break that static quickly and permanently. Chapter 2. The Old Teacher. Miyamoto Musashi moved through war and solitude and left instructions, not in slogans but in method, clarity of mind, economy of motion, and the refusal to be scattered by incidental disturbances. The samurai cultivated silence not as ascetic withdrawal, but as an instrument of discernment, a way to see clearly what must be done and what may be left undone. These teachings are direct. They sharpen perception by eliminating the unnecessary, and they begin with small, repeatable actions, rather than grand transformations. Chapter 3. Ken's First Morning. Ken is 37, an engineer who wakes to the feeling that his day is a list of fires he has already failed to put out. Before the coffee cools, he is answering messages and imagining worst-case scenarios. He is competent, loved, and exhausted by a nervousness that lives between tasks and in the margins of conversations. When he first hears the word Seijaku, he expects breathing exercises. What he finds is a disciplined architecture of time and attention that begins to change the posture of his life. Chapter 4. Chapter 1. The Rule of One. A central principle Musashi taught was focus on the decisive point. The samurai did not scatter effort across many fronts. For Ken, this became the rule of one. Every morning he names one single task that will receive his full, uninterrupted attention for a fixed period. He clears his workspace, silences distractions, and commits to this task as the hinge of the day. The simple act of naming and defending one objective reduces the brain's frenzy of partial commitments and allows deeper perception to emerge. Chapter 5. Rituals as Boundaries. The samurai used ritual not for pageantry but to create a clean transition between states, home to duty, planning to action, thought to execution. Ken adopted a brief ritual. Wash his hands, stand and breathe for 30 seconds, state the day's one objective aloud, and then begin. This habit functions as a boundary that signals the nervous system to shift from diffuse vigilance to concentrated presence, and it removes the residue of previous roles, so attention is not stolen before it begins. Over weeks, the ritual becomes a reliable hinge that permits Seijaku to enter the work hour. Chapter 6. Eliminate motion that steals attention. Musashi taught economy of movement. Every gesture should be efficient because the mind moves with the body. Ken scrutinized his daily motions and found many that served anxiety rather than results. Endless email checks, habitual scrolling, meetings without decisions. He instituted a strict limit. No email until the rule of one is complete, and no meetings without a clear decision objective. By reducing needless motion, he stopped giving anxiety so many openings to occupy his attention. Chapter 7. The practice of short silences. Seijaku is cultivated with short, disciplined silences that act like checkpoints for the mind. Ken committed to 3 5-minute silences each day, upon waking, midday, and before sleep, during which he refrained from planning or solving and simply attended to breath and bodily sensations. These pauses are not indulgent. They are corrective, restoring interoception and breaking the reflex that equates every thought with an imperative. Over time, these moments reduced the immediacy of anxious impulses and allowed clearer judgment to return. Chapter 8. Non-negotiables that forge identity. The samurai understood character as the product of small, repeated acts. Ken created 3 non-negotiables that defined his working identity: completing the rule of 1 before any other task, taking 1 30-minute walk without the devices each day, and refusing any meeting that lacked a decision point. These constraints are not restrictions for their own sake. They become the grammar of his life, shaping how he moves through obligations and who he is in the face of pressure. As these acts accumulated, they shifted his self-narrative from scattered responder to deliberate actor. Chapter 9. Surrender as clarity. In Bushido, surrender is not defeat but an honest accounting of limits that frees energy for what is within reach. Ken learned to identify what he could not meaningfully influence and to relinquish it without ritualized guilt. This surrender clarified his scope of responsibility and created a smaller, cleaner field for attention. Anxiety, which thrives on endless hypothetical control, loses power when boundaries are drawn and upheld with quiet resolve. Chapter 10. The Body as Instrument. Musashi insisted that the body and mind be trained together. Stillness in thought often requires steadiness in posture. Ken began to practice simple bodily disciplines, standing with aligned posture for 1 minute between tasks, breathing slowly for 6 cycles when he felt the chest tighten, and taking unadorned walks where the feet and breath were observed. These modest practices change physiology in ways that weaken the automatic anxiety response. The nervous system begins to expect steadiness rather than panic. Chapter 11. The Inner Voice and Small Corrections. The samurai listened to the inner voice and learned to correct its distortions with precise language and action. Ken noticed the pattern in his thoughts, imperatives phrased as catastrophes, and replaced large commands with one clear instruction. One small step. He practiced this correction until the inner voice became less tyrant and more advisor. The change is subtle but powerful. When the mind stops treating every thought as an emergency, decisions are made with equanimity rather than haste. Chapter 12. Measurement by presence, not panic. Progress under Seijaku is measured in recoveries of ordinary presence, rather than in dramatic breakthroughs. Ken's improvements were small, returning to a conversation after interruption without agitation, finishing an important design without reworking it 12 times, holding his child without the rehearsal of worst outcomes. These moments are the true currency of mastery, the quiet evidence that attention has been reclaimed from the machinery of anxiety. The samurai measures success by steadiness across many ordinary acts, not by occasional heroics. Chapter 13. The Discipline of Limits. Discipline here means the disciplined refusal to be everywhere at once. It is an austere kindness toward attention, protecting it like a resource and spending it only where it yields meaning. Ken learned to say no to tasks that violated his non-negotiables and to decline requests that would scatter his attention. This refusal is not cruelty, but an act of integrity. It preserves the field in which competent action and calm can arise. In living within these limits, Seijaku becomes a daily habit rather than an occasional retreat. Chapter 14. The Quiet Return. In the end, Seijaku is less a technique and more a reformation of relation to time, to body, to speech, and to the inner voice. The samurai lessons of Musashi and Bushido show a path of elimination and small, steady commitments. Name one objective, perform rituals of arrival, eliminate motion that serves anxiety, practice short silences, uphold non-negotiables, train the body, and correct the inner language. For Ken, these practices did not erase difficulty, but they moved him from being driven by a low, constant panic to living from a quiet center of attention. Conclusion: the simple architecture of calm. The remedy is simple and austere. Create boundaries. Perform a single significant act each day. Allow silence, and refuse what fractures attention. Seijaku asks for repetition, not drama. It asks for the steady rebuilding of habit into identity. In that rebuilding, the noise that once felt inevitable loses its authority, and a steadier life, clearer, quieter, more intentional, becomes possible through small, disciplined acts repeated without fanfare.